Hello and welcome to Green Building Bites presented by Green Building Alliance. I'm Ariel Levin Antela with the Green Building Alliance team, and in today's bite, I'm talking with Brooke Tully, a sustainability consultant who uses behavior change and marketing strategies to co-create conservation solutions. Brooke is a presenter at the Phipps Conservatory's Nature of Place Symposium, which takes place June 15th through 17th. So I'm talking with her today about how she uses behavior change strategies in the sustainability movement, what she's looking forward to learning about at the conference, and how her expertise can be applied to the green building industry. Hi, Brooke. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Ariel. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to do this interview with me.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
So, I was just wondering if you could give kind of a brief overview about what behavior change kind of entails and how you use it in your work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of a big category. So behavior change can mean a lot of different things. But in essence, the way I like to describe it is that it's encouraging or motivating people to shift their behaviors towards some social good end goal. And that can mean things like some things we're very familiar with eating healthier, being more active in our lives, all the way to something like we should be saving more for our retirement years. All of those kinds of shifts in behaviors or actions would fall under generally a behavior change umbrella. The way that I use it in my work is I focus on the field of conservation and sustainability. And that is really shifting human behaviors towards things that protect, preserve the planet in a way that is not exclusive to also benefiting humans, but trying to merge those things together as much as possible.
Why did you decide to focus your work on behavior change, which is kind of a niche area of the sustainability movement?
And I kind of probably got to it by accident a little bit. I've always been a person curious about humans and why they do the things they do and the decisions they make and the way they behave, and in particular, the way that humans communicate to one another. And so I started my professional career in advertising, which is, very much kind of how do we engage audiences and inspire and spark them to do something. Typically, this would be buying a product, but you can see it's not a huge stretch from there to how I described behavior change earlier. But I was feeling like, in my career in advertising, I loved what I was doing, but needed to feel like I was contributing to the greater good. And I found sort of a passion, discovered my passion for conservation and sustainability. And at that time, I was thinking I was taking a complete career change out of sort of understanding humans and advertising into protecting animals and species and habitats. But it was through the process of understanding behavior change in the context of conservation and sustainability, I saw just how much it was not a career change, but sort of a blending of careers, a blending of fields of study that thankfully I think is starting to, on its own, have a little bit more overlap naturally. But once I kind of discovered that, all of these ingredients play a role and come together, I think I just got even more entrenched in my love and my passion for how do we use these insights on human behavior, insights on what makes some of the things we're asking people to do difficult and challenging, and the sort of magic and creativity of communication strategies. How do we bring this together to potentially affect even greater change than what we have in the past?
So, talking about the conference, you're speaking at the Phipps Conservatory's Symposium, which kind of explores this relationship that we were talking about earlier between humans and the environment. And I was just wondering, what knowledge of yours are you really excited to share with people? And then what are you really interested in learning about from your fellow presenters and attendees?
This is my first, honestly, introduction to Phipps and to their Nature of Place Symposium. A lot of what I understood about essentially really the audience with the symposium and the intention is there's a lot of individuals out there who feel passionate about connecting their families, their neighbors, their communities with nature. Hope that folks take more action along the lines of protecting even local nature, like nearby in their backyard. But like many organizations I work with, will sort of struggle and not feel totally sure of how do I get more people engaged? How do I activate my community around this topic? What that means when we don't have the skills for that, if we kind of default to something I think many of us feel and kind of is sort of a source of frustration. We feel like we're yelling at people. We feel like we're talking at people or yelling into the void and no one's listening. And that can almost demotivate us as these like agents of change, because we have this passion. We want people to get on board. It feels obvious to us, why wouldn't we get on board? And yet we don't see that receptiveness. We don't see the numbers showing up. Really, what I'm hoping to provide in the presentation are some really practical ways of shifting that approach towards one that does really open the doors much more for more people to get engaged in many ways on their terms, on what they might get out of this experience that could be different than why we think they should get involved. But it all adds up to the same thing of more people getting involved. So I share some things like, my favorite theory, which is, the diffusion of innovation theory, talk about lowering some of the barriers that typically prevent people from taking action. And really the bulk of it is talking about how do we increase particular motivators that work really well to get more people, again, engaged, involved, excited, and activated on a topic that, whether it's a big organization using this or whether someone's using it to try to get more composting done in their neighborhood or more pollinator-friendly gardens or no mow May kind of happening, they can start to use more of these techniques like tomorrow. So I'm hoping to share some of that. The speakers in this symposium is just like an awesome list. The topics are they're so pertinent to so many of the questions and even struggles and frustrations we're having today. But I wrote down some of my favorites: Increasing Diverse Voices by Jasmine Graham, Using Games for Engagement. Janaya Kemper is doing that one. And this whole world of gamification, gaming as a method for engaging new audience and keeping people excited about it, having those reward system feedbacks. I'm excited to learn more from that. There's a presentation that I have seen a piece of before on co-designing conservation solutions. Dr. Kayla Cranston is teaching this one. And Ariel, as you know, co-creation is definitely something that I believe in strongly as part of the methodology that I teach. The last one I'll mention is Dr. Shane Hanlon. He does a lot of work on activism and policy and engaging policymakers. Again, it's a topic that always comes up. Big question, not necessarily the easiest audience to engage, as many of us may know, but such an important area to learn more about and explore.
You talked about kind of barriers and motivators to action before. Can you give us a little teaser into maybe one barrier or one motivator that you're going to talk about, just so people maybe can get an idea?
I'll share, this is probably one of my favorite motivators to share, and it will cross over a number of the different things I talked about in the presentation, which is show other people doing the desired behavior, or at least describe what other people are doing or what other people are trying to do more of. And it all comes down to one of our, human nature truths, is that we are a herd species. And as I say in the presentation, even us loners out there who like to believe we're not part of a herd species, we are still members of a herd species. We still sort of crave this sense of belonging. And we can help make these behaviors, kind of shift them from being sort of behind closed doors just for an individual into something that is a social activity that we can see what it looks like by watching other people doing it, because it's also a way that we learn. We learn that way since, birth even, and being able to demonstrate what the ideal behavior, even like the good enough behavior looks like, again, helps socialize and normalize that goal for folks. It's one that I think is just so underutilized. Traditionally, we tend to focus too much time on highlighting the behaviors we want people to stop doing. And we don't provide that alternative of like, this is what sustainable behavior looks like. It would go so far to kind of get us ready and primed to start doing it ourselves and feel even safe doing it, because we know others out there are already doing this. I'm not alone, and I know what it looks like.
I was wondering if you could think of any opportunities for the intersection of behavior change and the green building industry.
Imagine at least 3 pathways that it could appear. But certainly one challenge with green buildings is taking existing buildings that are not sustainable and green and upgrading them either in its entirety or in particular pieces that make it a bit more sustainable. And in order to do that, you would need to really convince a property owner, a building owner, to make those changes. Those changes often require effort and money. So there's a lot of reasons for why someone wouldn't do it, because falls into one of the deterrents we talk about, status quo bias, which is it's easier for them to not do any of this stuff. It's easier just to keep their building as is. And I think infusing some of the behavior change techniques and how to have that discussion with the building owner, with the property owner, how to think about the benefits beyond sustainability that they may gain from making that change. That's a whole thread and sort of avenue where I think behavior change could play a role here. Additionally, now we go to new buildings. So if you're working with architects or builders, those that supply the materials or buying the materials, that seems to me like multiple discussions of how to procure the most sustainable materials, how to build it in a way that uses the least amount of energy, getting everyone on board with making those choices and making those priorities. Because again, a lot of those may require more steps and more difficult steps. So what's in it for them? And the last thread I can think of is now you have the other side, the other audience, which are home buyers or renters. What do they prioritize when they are looking for a new home to buy? What do they prioritize for how they want to upgrade or fix up their home? And how do we engage with them on making those choices? There's certainly a segment of our audience that wants to do it regardless. They want the solar panels, they want the green energy, their built desires. They're already sort of what we would say like in our wheelhouse, right? But there's a lot of other folks that don't have this in their list of priorities. And that's an area where we can begin to grow sort of the green building movement, even to say, what would they get out of making these prioritizations, making these decisions? Potentially investing more money in the short term for less money in the long term. What would be that kind of inspiration and motivation for them to do this if they are not already just keen on sustainability naturally?
In terms of kind of tangible action steps, something that people can do you have any easy, simple tips or tricks for any building professionals that are watching that are maybe interested in implementing more techniques that are based in behavior change into their profession?
Yeah, I'll go with my top three that I love to talk about: understanding and knowing your audience. So take that time, step outside of ourselves and our little world and put ourselves in our audience's world so we can understand a bit more about what's going on with them. That is, to me, just key in adjusting and shifting our communication approach. We have a lot of things we want to say, but what do they need to hear? And we can't figure that out until we have a sense of, who they are. So that's my first tip. It's certainly maybe not an easy tip, but it's an important one. An easier one is I always emphasize that whatever we are asking people to do, that we need to make it clear, specific, and actionable. Sometimes we can make the mistake of being a bit vague or broad, like save energy, right? So save energy at home can mean 500 different things. So making it really specific and helping to guide the audience towards that thing, that action, that behavior is going to lead you to better results. Don't ask the audience to figure it out and interpret it on their own. Be as specific as possible. And the third one, it's kind of related to the being clear, specific, and actionable, is I always find it a helpful exercise to consider how can we help the audience follow through on what we're asking them to do. And some of that's understanding kind of psychological barriers, but also getting a bit creative of what could make this easier. Maybe it's too complicated right now. Maybe it is easy, but our audience doesn't quite know how easy it is. Maybe it's some infographic or instructions that are needed. Whatever it may be, making it as easy as possible for our audience, again, is going to help them follow through on it more consistently and for a longer period of time. I think we too often kind of push that burden onto the audience. And my sort of plug or encouragement is to put that burden more on our shoulders as those who are asking for that level of change. Is let's make it easy, clear, easy, and whenever possible, a little fun.
Well, I love those tips. I think those are going to be really valuable for the audience. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here, and I hope it was helpful, and look forward to maybe engaging more in the green building space in the future.